Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing good. I just want to give a shout out yet again to that D Plus show. Still is my favorite intro. Let's know right from the gin what kind of show you get in. It's great. Yep. It's great, great, Trevor.
It's a bad quality. You're
it's my
the D Plus
thing,
level show.
Yeah, it's my favorite one still.
180 some odd episodes.
I was doing the math too. It was like how long has it been? Yeah.
Yeah. Also joining us, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on?
What is going on is today we are picking up another theme month as we are doing the Spider-Man movies, specifically the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies this month, because they surprisingly all made the jump to Disney Plus a couple months back or a month or so back. It's these ones. It's Amazing Spider-Man 1 and Homecoming are all on Disney Plus now, with presumably Amazing Spider-Man 2 and the other Sony ones coming some other time down the line. What an
interesting... Right, they're so interesting. Like, that's the way it breaks down, where we get, like, Amazing Spider-Man 1, but not 2 for some reason.
Yeah, it seems to be like it's probably, like, existing deals already in place. I was looking it up a little bit beforehand, because I saw if you go outside of the U.S., Amazing Spider-Man 2 is on Disney Plus, but in the US, I believe Stars is basically where you can go find that right now. And so it's probably waiting for that deal to expire before it makes its way. But
everyone just buy physical media. You have it forever.
There you go.
And they can't delete it from the streaming service.
Indeed. That does help, since they
seem
to be wanting to do that more and more these days. So we're going to be talking about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films for the next couple weeks, starting today, of course, with Spider-Man from 2002, the original. It's going to be a little Spider-Man month. Obviously, we did Indiana Jones last month. We did Pirates, recently. So just kind of continuing the fun of let's do a sequence of things.
Let's rank shit.
It makes scheduling pretty easy also for at least a month. Our history lesson here, originally released May 3rd, 2002. Other releases of the time, 2002 is a weird year, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in some of the box office stuff. But going back to March 15th of that year, we had the 1-2 punch of Ice Age and the original Resident Evil. March 22nd was Blade 2, also in the comic book realm here. Death to Smoochie and Panic Room were March 29th. I highlight that just because I always remember Panic Room, seeing it and being very messed up by it. Being like, why did I go see this movie? This is not a Trevor movie. National Lampoon's Van Wilder was April 5th.
Yeah.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding and The Scorpion King were April 19th. Spider-Man here on May 3rd. Some of these we would have talked about because back when we did our Summer of Star Wars, because Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones was May 16th there, a couple weeks after Spider-Man.
When dreams died.
There you go. June 14th would bring us the duo of The Bourne Identity and Scooby-Doo. June 21st, a week later, would bring us Lilo and Stitch and a movie that will live in infamy in my mind, Minority Report, because I got my very first speeding ticket on my way home from a sneak preview of Minority Report. And then Men in Black 2 was July 3rd, to give you a sense of like where that was in the timeline of things. We were talking about Will Smith before we started recording. So our domestic gross here in 2002, Spider-Man had a domestic gross of $403.7 million, and a worldwide gross of $821.7 million. Where do you guys think that rates in the top 10 of 2002?
Oh, I think it's number 1.
For domestic gross, number 1?
Yeah.
How about you, Logan?
Yeah, I mean, certainly out of again, Trevor could be sneaky, and there could be like stuff happening in the fall. But certainly out of that list of movies, literally the only one that I think is going to give it a run for its money would be Star Wars. And I just feel like Attack of the Clones didn't hit that number. I feel good saying it's number 1 domestically as well.
All right, you are both correct. We'll run down some of the other highlights from that year. Lilo and Stitch, which I mentioned above, was number 14 with 145 million that year, which is nice because I always think of that as like one of the lesser like celebrated Disney films. It definitely has its champions and stuff, but
Jazz, a huge fan of Lilo and Stitch.
Coming in at number 13, which James Bond did we have this year, Logan?
We had Die Another Day.
Indeed, 148.7 million. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring was
Oh,
12,
okay, yeah.
149.5 million. Scooby-Doo was number 11. Beautiful Mind, number 10. Ice Age, number 9.
Yeah.
Men in Black 2, number 8. Austin Powers in Goldmember was number 7.
Yeah, that's a rough
Speaking
one.
of Tom Cruise, which we were talking about earlier. How does this work out? Because Lord of the Rings Two Towers is number 6, so maybe it was like residual money that Fellowship of the Ring was bringing in the beginning of the year that placed it in the top 10.
If I recall correctly,
because it wasn't that they both came out that year.
No, Fellowship of the Ring came out the year before, but it came out.
They always come out the end of the year.
End of the year, so yeah, I think it would have been like carried over from like showings.
It's like this year, Avatar: The Way of Water is like still one of the top grossing movies, even though it came out end of 2022.
Last year.
Number 5 was My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which blew a whole bunch of people's expectations out. Came out of nowhere, 223.9 million.
Fantastic film, Abbott Family classic, certified.
Yep. Same.
Signs was number 4.
Yeah, Signs great.
227 million. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the second film in that series.
Something from the fall.
243 million. And then Star Wars Episode 2 was 302 million, so $100 million behind Spider-Man on the domestic side of things. On the worldwide gross, as I said, this was $821.7 million. Where do you guys think that falls worldwide wise?
Knowing about Harry Potter, that could do it. Knowing about Two Towers too, I could see that possibly doing it worldwide. Die Another Day. I mean, Bond movies obviously do better or internationally as well. But I know Die Another Day didn't hit 800 million. I know that. So I would say it's a really question for me of how much did Two Towers do. Cameron, how much do you know about Lord of the Rings movies?
Box office, not a damn. Not a damn.
I know that Return of the King did $1 billion, I think.
What do you know about Two Towers? I know in that scene, Aragorn broke his foot kicking the helmet.
His big toe, but yes.
I'm gonna say Spider-Man's still number 1 overall.
I'm gonna say number 3.
All right. The top 10, Minority Report was number 10 worldwide. My Big Fat Greek Wedding dropped down to number 9 worldwide.
Still number 9 worldwide. Good for Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ice Age was number 8. Signs was number 7. Die Another Day did jump all the way up to number 6.
Yep.
Just behind Men in Black 2 at number 5. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, fell to number 4 with $645 million worldwide. Spider-Man comes in at number 3 with 821.7 million. Ahead of it, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets with 878 million.
And number 1,
Lord of the Rings, Two Towers with $936 million worldwide.
Yeah. What did Die Another Day do?
Die Another Day was 431 million.
Yeah, okay. That's right. I pegged it at. Okay.
Number 3 worldwide gross on that one. Our runtime is 2 hours and 1 minute. In the Sony Spider-Man timeline of things, this kicked everything off. Then we'll get Spider-Man 2, June of 2004, Spider-Man 3, May 4th of 2007. So the fact that Spider-Man 2 is going to come in 2 years' time is like, they struck gold and they immediately wanted to try and crank out more. And
I will
surprisingly, it worked out very well because, I think Spider-Man 2 is the best of this trilogy.
I'll also say it's just an era where movies came out quicker too, right? We had 4 Pierce Brosnan Bond films in 7 years, right? Like movies just were made faster back then too, I think.
It definitely depends on the kind of movie, because this is the era where, like, much like the original Star Wars was coming out every 3 years.
Right.
It didn't jump to a 2-year timeline until the sequel trilogy. So yeah. But yes, our director here, of course, Sam Raimi, having done The Evil Dead, these Spider-Man movies. After these, he would go on to do Oz the Great and Powerful, and then most recently, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Love Sam Raimi.
Our writer here, who we just spoke about recently, David Koepp, wrote the screenplay here.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
We talked about him because he was also the screenplay for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So other films he'd worked on prior to that, Death Becomes Her, Jurassic Park, Carlito's Way, the original Mission Impossible, The Lost World, Panic Room, which I mentioned earlier. Here he did Spider-Man, and then he would go on to do War of the Worlds, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Angels and Demons, the 2017 Mummy, and most recently, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Our cast of characters: Tobey Maguire as Maguire as Spider-Man, as Peter Parker Spider-Man. Prior to this, he had done films like Pleasantville,
which is great.
That's
I love Pleasantville
one.
Yeah.
Extremely underrated film.
Yeah, glad we're on the same page.
I think Pleasantville, in particular, we talked about this not too long ago, but it's like the vibes it has were so The Giver, which was like, and it was right around the time that I had probably read The Giver and like middle school and stuff like that. So yeah,
that's a great shout out.
It definitely like burned in my brain of that. Also, it had a very adorable Reese Witherspoon, I believe.
It did, yeah. She's Tobey
sister.
Tobey Maguire's sister. Yeah.
Yep. Cider House Rules, Wonder Boys, all of those were pre-Spider-Man. Then alongside Spider-Man, he would do Seabiscuit. And then more recently, he was in The Great Gatsby. And then obviously Spider-Man No Way Home, returning to the role. And he was also in last year's Babylon.
Yes, he's a creep.
Indeed. All I remember is like the meth teeth from like whatever little clip I saw of that movie.
Oh, I have no idea what even happened in Babylon.
I know from like reputation what happened in Babylon. I've not seen the movie apart from
it's great.
Damien Chazelle clips and stuff. Yeah. Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, having been in films like Platoon. I believe he's the bad guy in Speed 2 Cruise Control.
I don't know who else he would be. Yeah.
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
He was in American Psycho. Of course, he's here in Spider-Man. He plays Gil in Finding Nemo. He's in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. He was in John Carter. He was much troubled production of John Carter. On the video game side of things, he was in Quantum.
He is in Beyond.
Quantum Dreams, Beyond Two Souls. He of course was perfect casting in the Netflix Death Note for whatever else that movie was. It had Willem Dafoe as Ryuk. And then he's been in Aquaman, The Lighthouse, and he was also in the game 12 Minutes from.
Is he in Aquaman?
Yeah, he's basically like the advisor to the king. So he's like Aquaman's confidant.
I don't remember Aquaman at all.
Yeah.
You know what I will say about Willem Dafoe? You know what he would be a great Bond villain.
Oh yeah.
Also a great Joker, but he'd be a great Bond villain too.
Yeah. He had a whole SNL monologue about how people say he'd be a great Joker, and he's like, I don't know what to think about that being.
Did you catch that he was in the Boondock Saints?
Yeah.
I did not have him in Boondock Saints, but I did see that in his repertoire.
It's a great shout out to Cameron.
He is revolutionary in that film.
Yeah, he's great.
That's a great when he shows up in femme attire in that movie, but is like the biggest badass in that movie. It's so sick.
Nice.
Love Willem Dafoe.
Kirsten Dunst in here as Mary Jane Watson, having been in films like Interview with the Vampire, Little Women, and Jumanji and Bring It On prior to this. And of course, Spider-Man. After Spider-Man, she was in the film Melancholia, and most recently, The Power of the Dog. James Franco as Harry Osborn, kind of got his start in Freaks and Geeks. After Spider-Man, would go on to be in Pineapple Express, 127 Hours, Spring Breakers, and The Disaster Artist, among other things. Cliff Robertson as Ben Parker, with credits going back to 1943, including Charlie and Escape from L.A., but probably best known to audiences for his role as Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. Rosemary Harris was May Parker, with credits going back to 1952. She was Academy Award nominated for her role in Tom and Viv, but also probably best known as Aunt May here in Spider-Man. J.K. Simmons, of course, as J. Jonah Jameson. Using a number of things prior to Spider-Man. Spider-Man was one of those breakout roles for him. He's also in Juno, Whiplash, Justice League, Klaus. He was in Palm Springs a couple years ago, which I really enjoyed. And he is the voice of Omni-Man in Invincible. And then lastly, a little bit role there from a young Joe Manganiello as Flash Thompson, who of course would go on to be in True Blood and the Magic Mike franchises. And then a handful of little cameos here. Of course, we have Bruce Campbell as the ring announcer / Sam Raimi's good luck charm, going back to Evil Dead stuff. Elizabeth Banks as Miss Brandt, will of course go on to be in The Hunger Games, among many other things.
This was one of her first roles, I believe.
I feel like she'd been doing stuff before that, but maybe.
She's also in Scrubs. Very important character.
Indeed.
She's a very important character in Scrubs. She's awesome.
Randy Savage, of course, as Bonesaw McGraw. Of course, was Macho Man Randy Savage in the WWF and WCW and all the others.
Bonesaw is ready.
A very young Octavia Spencer.
This
was
Octavia
one of her early roles as Check-In Girl. She would, of course, go on to be in projects like The Help and Hidden Figures. And then also like a fun little cameo from a Xena Warrior Princess, Lucy Lawless, as Punk Rock Girl, who's basically like, she's the one that's like... eight arms, eh? Sounds kind of hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then here's a little segment I'm going to throw in for these. We have Stan Watch. Who knows or remembers what Stan Lee's cameo is in this film?
He saves a small child during the Unity Day parade.
Indeed.
Caught that today when I was watching it. I was
yes.
like, aha!
Is this the first Stan Lee cameo of any... Was he in X-Men?
I think he was in X-Men. I don't recall, though. But yes, he is credited in here as Man at Fair. And it definitely would go on to be like of course, a recurring theme to have him pop up in all these things. Mm. Doing a little deviation of our all out of bubblegum body count segment for the trivia on this one. What do we think the body count is? And then I'm going to have kind of a follow-up question to that. So what do we think the body count in this film is?
Uncle Ben dies and Norman dies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are the two easy ones.
The mugger dies.
Mugger dies. The Norman's partner dies.
Dr. Strom.
Yeah.
Yep.
The board of directors, which I believe were 5 of them there.
Yeah. That's a great shout out, Cameron. Yeah.
So
that takes us to 9.
9.
I think the board of directors is the biggest group of people that die at any one time. But I'll probably add on a couple other people that Goblin might kill around. I'll say 13 people die.
I'm going to go up and say I'm going to round up and say 20 because of the bunker. When he blows up the bunker at Quest Labs.
Great shout out. I'll move mine up too then. I'll say, you said 20. Yeah, I'll say 25, right?
All right. The total kill count for Spider-Man.
It's something crazy. Trevor's smiling.
No, 24.
There you go.
You identified the high count that you guys had almost missed of the bunker, because the bunker has 11.
Oh wow,
kills.
That many. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of those 24, how many are not Green Goblin kills?
Ooh.
And
Uncle Ben,
if you
obviously.
can specifically identify them.
3?
Uncle Ben the Mugger and... Ooh, that's a great question, Trevor.
Maybe just the 2 then.
I can only think of 2 as well.
We'll go ahead and call it there, because yes, it is just those 2.
Just those 2, okay.
Uncle Ben killed by an unyet known Flint Marko. And then, yes, Dennis Carradine of the Mugger accidentally trips and falls and kills himself effectively. But yes, everybody else is a Norman kill. Norman kills.
Norman's deadly.
Yeah, Norman throws Dr. Strom out of the testing chamber windows, killing him. Back to formula is what they credited that one as.
Nice.
Uncle Ben dies from the gunshot wound. Dennis Carradine, aka the carjacker, trips over a pipe, falls backwards to his death. The project test, Green Goblin shoots the exoskeleton suit with a missile, killing up Captain Curtis immediately. And then he shoots a bunker with his missile from the glider, blowing up General Slocum, an announcer, 2 project coordinators, 2 soldiers, and 4 technicians. So yes, 11 kills right there.
Dead.
And then 9 kills at the Unity Day Festival. Green Goblin throws a pumpkin bomb at a stone railing, causing it to collapse, and 2 civilians fall to their deaths.
Yeah.
And then he throws another pumpkin bomb at Balkan, Fargus, and 4 Oscorp board members, disintegrating them. So there are 6 in that iconic like skeleton disintegration thing. And then Green Goblin kicks Spider-Man into a lamp, causing it to fall on a civilian, killing him. That's what they credit that as.
Oh, they see. I was thinking about that. That's why I said number 3, because I was like, do you count that as a Spider-Man kill? But nope, that's a Green Goblin kill. You're right.
And then Green Goblin activates the Goblin Glider, which accidentally and unintentionally impales himself in his crotch, as they identified it. So yes, that was his 22nd of the kills. Yes. So yeah, fun little segment there. Good, I'll keep an eye on those for the next couple movies.
I mean,
but it might be a similar kind of vibe of like, all right, yeah, like how many deaths does the villain have, kind of thing.
Just Doc getting his like the surgery scene alone has got to be like 10 people. I feel like he's fucking wiping out doctors.
Some additional trivia bits here. This was the first film to gross $100 million in its opening weekend alone. The time no movie had done so, even when adjusted for inflation. In the wake of the terror attacks of September 11th, Sony recalled teaser posters which showed a close-up of Spider-Man's face with the New York skyline, including prominently the World Trade Center towers reflected in his eyes. However, not all posters were recovered, and ones still at large are now highly prized collector's items, because we're a morbid species. And then lastly, I'm sure there's a ton of other Spider-Man trivia stuff out there, but none of them really jumped out at me. So the last one I'm including here is the Sam Raimi trademark of including his 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88, also known as the Classic, appears in the movie as, of course, Uncle Ben's car, as it continues to appear in pretty much all the things Sam Raimi does. So what do we think? How does this hold up? Logan, I will throw it to you first.
So I like the Sam Raimi movies a lot. I think it holds up really well still. We talked about it a little bit off air. I think this is a movie just from such a different era of films, both in the sense of like, it's in this sort of dark age of superhero movies that it sort of helps jumpstart, but also just like movies in general are in a weird place in 2002, right? The big action movies of the 80s and early 90s, that era's kind of faded. The kind of early success of like the Tim Burton and then Joel Schumacher Batman movies have sort of come to a close now. And we're just sort of in this weirder era of like series starting actors getting their starts, right? Like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Scorpion King is happening right now. Ryan Reynolds in Van Wilder is coming out right now, right? Like stars and movies that are going to be really big are just coming out. Shrek, Ice Age, etc. But we're not really into like the modern scale of movies yet in the same way. It's a really interesting era, and I think you see a lot of that in this movie. It is very violent, and it, I think, benefits a lot from that. And I also think that Sam Raimi is a director who really trusts his audience a lot. Right? Like, I think a critique some people have with some of the MC movies that I sort of agree with, that they sort of don't trust the audience enough and the audience's intelligence enough. And Sam Raimi in this movie handles like really mature themes of like grief and loss and parental trauma and like just like even the schoolyard stuff I think is done really well. And even just hearing you say this movie's 2 hours and a minute, I was like, holy shit, is it really that fast? Like, it feels like there's a lot packed in here, but I think it does it all really well. And I think, you know, the casting is, I think, pretty across the board great. I mean, Tobey Maguire, I probably always will be Spider-Man to me when I first like think of that character, because I was literally 10 years old when this movie came out, right? So that's just sort of who my Spider-Man is always going to be. But even like Kirsten Dunst is going to be Mary Jane for me when I think of that character, right? And James Franco is great as Harry, and obviously we could do a whole podcast on how great Green Goblin is in this movie and how great Norman Osborn is as a character here and his dynamic with everyone else. But like Uncle Ben and Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson, like
the fact that they keep bringing him back as J. Jonah Jameson,
and like he is the GOAT.
Just nailed that casting right out the gate. Didn't need to try.
Exactly, exactly, and like so much on this movie, I think works really well, and I think, you know, we'll get an even better balance for everything next week, because I do think Spider-Man 2 is better. But I think this is a really great start, and especially grading it on the curve of this came out in 2002, when really you had to look at X-Men and Blade, but Blade was doing such a different thing. So really just X-Men is like the only superhero movie at the time. And this really being the movie that sort of brought superhero movies really back into the forefront. I think it's great. I mean, we'll get into kind of the nitty gritty, but I think it definitely holds up still.
All right. Cam, how about you?
I am a little less on the I think it holds up scale than Logan is. I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that's pretty, not even dated, but it's such a Raimi stylistic choice that I just don't think holds up in the modern era. Which I think is totally fair. I think it was like, this lens of what Spider-Man is and what New York is very much caught up in, I think, of this idea of a comic book cartoon era of Spider-Man that is the like late 60s, early 70s era Spider-Man comic books, where you have a very we talked about this last night, Trevor. But like when I look at Peter Parker, and as I think to this day I still think that let me rephrase that. Tom Holland to me is the perfect Spider-Man and Peter Parker. I think that he perfectly puts both into a great way. As far as like what I'm looking for my Peter Parker and what I'm looking for my Spider-Man, when it comes to characteristics, when it comes to like, I understand some people might have issues with his Spider-Man as far as like his Spider-Man films and like the themes and things that go on in it. But I think when it comes to, there is something that about Peter Parker that naturally needs to feel pathetic. And I think Tobey Maguire completely nails it on such a deep level of doe-eyed all the time, constantly getting like is so involved inside of being Spider-Man that he completely misses anything that's going on in anybody else's lives. It does a lot. Another thing that this movie does is it takes up a pretty substantial timeline of when he becomes gets his powers to, by the end of the movie, it's a good chunk of time has passed. They've graduated high school. They have entered college, and they've gone from late teens late teens as teenagers in high school to late teens as teenagers in college and university age. And I think that there is a level of the fact that it covers so much time is fascinating to me. I caught it around this time, is how much time caught up, because the question comes up sometimes with well, how long has he realistically been? And here we can kind of track that, not by firm dates and counts, but we get we get a really great feeling of how long this person's been out there doing something. There's a lot that I love about this movie, and a lot of it comes down to I love Sam Raimi. If you are not a big fan of Sam Raimi's directing style and I will say his artistic lens that he puts on his movies, of you can tell these are movies. You can tell these are movie sets. You can tell that these are very specific things that are meant to make you feel like you're watching a movie. And I think that he does a great job of that. But I also think that if you want that level of escapism and kind of like that that suspense of disbelief, he does not always nail that, because every 30 minutes there's a wink to the audience. And so I think that there is a weakness to that. I enjoy those things, but as a film and how it holds up, I think that is a structural weakness to the average moviegoer.
Yeah, I think that segues into my thoughts pretty nicely. I've long been on kind of the like, I enjoyed these movies for what they were at the time, and then I just think that like the Spider-Man movies we've gotten since have been more up my alley. I am not a huge Sam Raimi fan, so a lot of the Raimi-isms don't really work for me. I think Tobey Maguire feels more wooden than I would like my Peter Parker to be, and more like, he's not like one-notey or anything like that. It's just, he's not like, I like when Peter Parker is having fun with his quips and whatnot, and I just never get that vibe from Tobey Maguire. It is so much Tobey Maguire is like sad and pathetic Spider-Man that you were kind of touching on there, that just doesn't vibe for me.
That's why
in hindsight, from following like the way what we were talking about last night, is like I think I think Tobey Maguire is a good Peter Parker. I think Andrew Garfield is a good Spider-Man, and I think Tom Holland is like a good both of them. We'll get into that for sure more. Yeah. I think like the other aspect is I like the movies, the plots that Tobey Maguire is around more than I like Tobey's Peter / Spider-Man. I like Andrew Garfield's Peter and Spider-Man more than I like the movies that he's in. And again, like Tom Holland is kind of like a good blend of the two for me. That said, like coming back and rewatching this for the first time in a little while, I probably watched this back when like Kind of Funny was doing their Spider-Man MCU in review kind of, or Spider-Man in review stuff. I like it better than I did last time. But I think that's part of that's like I was a little bit more like tempered with what to expect going into it, but it is absolutely a film of its time. Like most iconically in like the Macy Gray at Unity Day kind of thing of like, oh, that's a name I have not thought about in 20 years apart from whenever I watch this movie is Macy Gray. And yeah, there are a lot, like when you were touching on kind of like, this is a weird, like no man's land almost of movies. It is the, like those 90s movies that were like, action and explosives in miniature and stuff like Independence Day or something. Those are dying out in favor of CG and stuff. And this is kind of like that bridging the gap thing here. And it is like a weird time for movies. And there are like weird, like, again, the iconic, like, pumpkin bomb that just vaporizes people and turns them into skeleton. Like they're all like, and then like skeletons fall to the ground. Like that's an image that I will always remember and associate with this movie. Because like that, it's so silly. And it like, that is 100% a Sam Raimi kind of thing. And like, and that kind of beat. And I laugh at it, but I don't think I don't feel like I'm supposed to be laughing at it, or not as much as I am laughing at. Like I'm laughing at it for the wrong reasons, I think. But yeah, like Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, fantastic as Norman Osborn. It was quite a year for these kind of like two-faced roles, because as we said, like Two Towers is a few months away, and we're gonna get the great Andy Serkis Gollum performance that overshadows this, but like just because of how great that was. But it's the same kind of vibes, like him walking up, having the conversation with the mirror, and like it being shot that it is okay, the camera is on, like, it can effectively all be in one shot, and Willem Dafoe is just doing, like, acting his ass off in that sequence is phenomenal. Like I also studied enough like performance arty things in college in theater to know that like Willem Dafoe, very accomplished, like New York underground kind of actor, doing that stuff like in the lead up to this. So he's definitely like has the chops to do all of that and is a ton of fun there. And then it of course has like incredibly iconic moments, like the upside down kiss in the rain kind of thing, the sequence where like Peter like catches everything on the tray is one of those great ones that like trivia wise is like that took 1 billion takes to try and do and get right, and these days it would just be like a CGI thing. I will say like there were a couple of beats where I was like, oh, that's a fun like way of kind of introducing like the Spidey sense of like, okay, it's not just he sees the fist coming at him. It is like he sees the fly and he sees like the paper planes slow down and that kind of stuff. Like there's cool, fun ideas there. Obviously, like the Bonesaw McGraw, Bonesaw is ready. Iconic, great, little bit there. But also speaking of things that don't like age well, oh, that's a nice outfit. Did your husband make it for you? It's like, all right, calm down, homophobic Peter Parker.
But that's led at least to like some really good memes of like Bonesaw having like a really great like response back that have kind of existed.
Well, yes, now. He did. Thank you very much. Oh,
he worked very hard on it last night.
So there's obviously a lot to enjoy, and I think a lot of that also just comes from like it's a Peter Parker origin story. Those are fun. There's a reason that they did them again with Andrew Garfield, and even if we didn't need to do it with Tom Holland just because people were getting fatigued by it, there's like a lot of the origin stories of these superheroes are iconic, and so you do want to kind of play with them and have those fun moments with those characters. So there's definitely a lot of fun to be had here, while there's also like a lot of like stiffness. Like I don't think Peter / Spider-Man has any great like action in this movie really, and like in particular there are some very iconic things where it's like the memeified thing of like Mary Jane being swung away and it's clearly just like Kirsten Dunst holding on to like a mannequin of Spider-Man. Like the swinging I think works, because it is early CG. They clearly put a lot of time and effort into it, but like the fights don't really do a ton for me. To what you were talking about, Cameron, like with the time that passes, I do like that we get kind of like a montage of him like figuring out his abilities, figuring out what he can do, and then like another montage later of him being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So we do get like those little bits that are kind of like establishing him enough to the point that like the Daily Bugle is going to start kind of like, realizing how much he sells and start, J. Jonah Jameson start kind of like turning him into enemy number one. I
did not remember that. And after that, I was just like, oh my gosh, I love it. Cause he's like, page 6, they're talking, and like, as somebody who works in like in media, they bought, like, advertisers bought up both of those, and it's like, okay, we'll push him to page 7 and give him 10% to cut. No, make it 5.
Yeah.
It's like also cementing J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson perfectly in encapsulating that in that moment. You don't even need Spider-Man in there. That's who J. Jonah Jameson is.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to enjoy about this, but there are also a lot of things where I'm like, these beats don't hold up as well as I like, and a lot of it is like just in hindsight and having a better understanding of Sam Raimi's like kind of style and stuff like that. It is just like, oh, there are just things with him that I don't vibe with. I didn't have as critical an eye when I was watching these movies, in high school and college initially. That I do now, but yeah, still a fun time. This is to pull a Loganism. This is the epitome for me of a movie of like, if it's on, in the background while I'm doing things,
sure,
that's fun. That's a good time. I'm gonna have a good time just kind of letting that play out. I know the movie well enough that like, even if I'm not eyes on the screen, I know exactly what's happening on the screen at any given moment. So yeah, shout out to that. So there we kind of gave our general thoughts. Any favorite moments or favorite scenes anybody wants to shout out?
Yeah, I have one in particular. I love everything from him waking up in the morning being ripped to going to school, like the little bits of like, oh, he pulls the paper banner off of the bus on accident, and it's like stuck to him. And he's like, what's going on with that? The whole lunchroom scene. But what I really, really, really love is when he's in the alley and he looks at his fingers and he realizes that like when he wants to, like he learns how to control the grip, and he learns it, and you see the zoom in of it, and it's like the little like spider legs coming out of it, and it's just like, it's so cool. And then that entire rooftop scene, I didn't realize it, but shout out to the makeup department, because his arm, I never realized that he has a patch.
He's got like the little web.
Yeah, he has a little like patch of like skin that's paler than the rest of his skin. That is where the web shoots out from. And it's like, oh, but when he's on the rooftop, you get the scene of where you see the line from the spider bite go down to that patch. And I noticed that. I'm like, that is such great detail to being like, this is how it's spread throughout his body and everything. And I'm just like, I loved all of that. I do love the natural webbing. I think it's like, I think it's iconic in so many different ways. I understand why they move away from it, because it's technically kind of really gross.
It's weird.
It's weird and gross.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love it, because it just fits with this, it just fits for this Spider-Man, and it's so great. Shout out to like just all when I say that this is such a blend of like the time that the film was that came out in the early 2000s, but also being a weird mashup with like 60s, is a lot of fashion, cars, buildings, advertisement. A lot of things are like taken, like pulled from 60s style stuff.
There are a lot of a lot of design choices as well that are like direct references. And this is where I didn't like go deep in the weeds on the trivia, because a lot of them were just this of like, oh, Mary Jane's costume in such and such a scene is, reminiscent of, a Gwen Stacy
issue 171, probably, like, right?
Yeah.
There were lots of those little beats, I think like at the beginning when she's on the bus, she's wearing an outfit that is very like iconically a Gwen Stacy outfit.
Yeah.
Obviously one of the ones that has, made the rounds more in like the memeable, shareable culture is the fact that at the Thanksgiving dinner scene, you have Peter wearing Goblin colors and Norman wearing Spider-Man colors as like an indication that they're both on each other's minds and all that kind of stuff. Like they definitely like lean into the comic bookness for the design of a lot of the elements.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's just Sam Raimi's such a massive geek and nerd, and there's two things he loves: it's comic books and horror films, and so there. And also shout out to the way that both Peter Parker's transformation and Green Goblin's awakening are so horror driven. Just plays directly into it with the lightning flashing, the sweating, pacing, and the lab experiment going wrong and turning him into a monster. It's
just gonna get amped up with the Doc Ock stuff next week. Yeah,
it's so perfect. It's so perfect with the way that he does this stuff. And I love it so much.
Yeah. I think that, Cameron said so much of it so well. Me and Cameron, I think, are just really big Sam Raimi guys, and so that helps a lot, I think, and we just love a lot of, I think, his kind of quirks and kind of creative flourishes. Yeah, I agree. I think Peter turning into Spider-Man, that whole sequence is so good. I think him at school is so good. I think him on the roof, obviously him like falling is great, right? Like there's so much here that I think is so well done about the origins of Peter Parker, right? That I think just by the nature of what Tom Holland Spider-Man is, we just sort of don't get him as Peter Parker, and that's it in the same way. Or even Andrew Garfield, I feel like they just don't really have a character for his Peter Parker. It's just so much of like him as Spider-Man. I obviously disagree to Trevor's point. I think Tobey Maguire is like so perfect, and I really like the fact that his Peter Parker is just nerdy and kind of just quiet and inquisitive, because that's sort of the Peter Parker I remember like.
Is it that is it that he's wooden, or is it that he's like so socially awkward?
Yeah, and I read it as him being socially awkward, and like that's sort of the Peter Parker that I just sort of like always envisioned from like like the 60s and 70s comics, right, when he first turns, and like, you know, that is sort of who I always envisioned Peter Parker being, which is sort of the issue I have with Andrew Garfield a little bit, and then for sure Tom Holland, who's way too cool for school. And then we get to like his Spider-Man, like Tobey's Spider-Man is so interesting because I think out of all three of the actors, I think his Spider-Man is the most just him as Peter Parker still, right? Like I think there's less of a like divide, and I kind of like that interpretation of the character, right? Whereas it feels like for Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, they're sort of putting on almost like a persona to like sort of mask their identity, and Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker Spider-Man is just sort of like, this is who I am. This is who I am. I'm a sad, mopey guy, and I'm a sad, mopey Spider-Man, and I can't really hide that well. It feels a little bit like Robert Pattinson's Batman a little bit, where just like he can't really hide himself at all behind the mask. And I kind of dig that. He easily has my favorite Spider-Man costume for sure. I love, and to be fair, it's also just like such an iconic one at this point, but like I love the design of it. And it's something that Tom Holland can't help, but like I think Tobey just looks so much like a Peter Parker would, like just like kind of long and lanky. I mean, he's probably got 5 inches on Tom Holland, it feels like. And so yeah, like I think all of that's great, but there's so many small beats, right? Like Cameron touched on it a little bit, but I think the whole Thanksgiving dinner is great.
Oh, yeah.
I think that whole scene is so good. And gets into like just sort of the weirdness of this movie, right? Like Willem Dafoe is like threading such a like fine line that like I feel like in any other actor's hands would make this so camp or so over the top, but he like just knows how to do it so well. And like he, I think, is playing so much with his eyes and facial expression and body language at all times. You're getting so much out of that. You know, he's sort of doing, Trevor mentioned Gollum, but like a very Two-Face kind of dynamic here, and gives us a really sad villain, right? I mean, one thing that I think,
I don't know about that. He's like a dick to his son from the off before he's a bad like CEO.
Sure, but I think one thing that the Tobey Maguire movies do, I certainly think better than the other Spider-Man movies, is that their villains are so three-dimensional, and so I think perfectly suited for like that their respective point in Spider-Man's story. And I think Norman and what Willem Dafoe is doing is so good to kind of help flesh out Spider-Man and his own sort of morality and character journey and character arc, and is just such a well-rounded character. I mean, some people might like the fact that, you know, Harry Osborn's going to spend the rest of this trilogy moping about his dad and never get over it, but it works here and it works in Spider-Man 2. And yeah, like I think there's so many small beats, and like the last big thing that I want to talk about for sure is I think the final fight between Peter and Green Goblin is great. I don't agree with the fact that like with Trevor in that sense, like I think that fight is great. I think that fight is brutal. I think it's bloody. I think it's a fight that probably wouldn't be in an MCU movie now. Like I think it's very, you know, it's very intense. And I think Sam Raimi leans into the horror elements and kind of the darkness that he's had in some other films in that scene in particular. And yeah, or I guess also when he fucking blows up on May. But yeah, like I think, you know,
oh god,
that final scene is that I also forgot about that. That final scene is so good, right? And I think, you know, despite the many issues with Sam Raimi's time as, you know, kind of the creative force behind Spider-Man here, I think all of his endings of his movies are all really solid, especially the first two. And they're all, I think, emotionally kind of fraught and engaging. And, you know, Spider-Man, Peter's final decision in the graveyard is a very striking scene to just kind of end a movie on. And him kind of having to reject Mary Jane. Like, I think this is a Peter who, by the end of this movie, the lesson he sort of learned is he can't live this simple life really. He has to just kind of fully commit to just being Spider-Man, and he can't have that Peter Parker life. And that really is going to be a recurring theme throughout these movies. And I find that really engaging versus like sort of where we are with Andrew Garfield, who sort of gets to be happy for a good chunk of his 2 movies until a very sad end. Or Tom Holland, who I think is definitely kind of the most kind of carefree for most of his run as well, until obviously, sad things happen at the end of his. And Tobey Maguire just feels like he never got to have the happy part. Like even when he gets Mary Jane, and the kind of following movies here, it's in a very kind of tense way and troubled way. And I like the fact that his Peter is almost more like Batman-y in that sense, right? That he can't have like a happy life. And I think they nailed that aspect of Peter Parker's character really well.
Yeah.
I think for me, when it comes to the difference between for me, I always have been of the mind that when Peter Parker, especially in his early career, puts on the mask to become Spider-Man, he's able to express the kind of like inner frustration and rage that he feels. And that's in line with the early comics, where Peter Parker's mental state in the early comics is just like, if I could get away with it, I'd kill you, Flash. Like not to that level, but pretty intensely.
Pretty close.
Yeah. It is a very like very visceral, very like, you look back on it, it's very much like angry white man syndrome in his mentality.
His whole life, right? Yeah, like a kid who's always been bullied and never had the chance to stand up for himself.
And that's why Spider-Man inadvertently bullies his villains, because he expresses that rage out on them. Eventually matures out of it in the comic books for sure, but like that, so that not having differentiating is one of the reasons why I think Tobey Maguire is like his Spider-Man, not his Peter Parker, but his Spider-Man is the lowest for me. Is because it isn't that differential. We don't get to see the ramifications of what hiding your identity lets you do and express. The way that I think Andrew Garfield's does extraordinarily well. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is great for me, because he is that like, I am going to like whether it's his insults, his like his much more aggressive, like Tobey Maguire, especially in this movie, spends most of his time as Spider-Man helping people.
So I'm gonna throw.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna throw in one of my favorite things here, because it, I think, does tie into that. Like, I think before the Uncle Ben speech, he is that angry.
100%,
like he does fight Flash, and he's like proud of the fact that he like finishes the fight, and he is angry and
humiliating Bonesaw, right? Even that aspect.
Yeah, you're right.
Like he is angry, and he is dismissive when Uncle Ben gives him the of course iconic like, with great power comes great responsibility. He's not ready to hear it.
It's so good.
It's one of the reasons why that scene works.
He's so happy. Like I that's like one of my favorite moments in this movie is like, he gets wronged by the promoter on a technicality of, hey, like it was $300 for 3 minutes or whatever. You've pinned him in 2. You're 3,000 for 3 minutes. You pinned him in 2. You're lucky I'm giving you 100 or whatever. And he's like furious about that. And so as soon as the promoter gets robbed, he lets the guy walk by, and it works incredibly well in this movie because they haven't retconned it yet. That is the direct link to Uncle Ben's death. Like, he could have, if he had been the heroic character, if he had done something to step in, Uncle Ben doesn't get shot and carjacked, 5 minutes later or something like that. And so it is like the beautiful, heartbreaking tragedy of that character that leads to Uncle Ben's death. And he's angry about it. He chases the carjacker.
That's true.
He's out for death. Well, yeah. He would have gladly killed the guy. He effectively does by fear. Yes, the guy trips over it. So, Sam Raimi is giving Spider-Man an out, and Spider-Man doesn't physically kill him, but it's basically manslaughter.
I mean, the look on Peter's face, Tobey Maguire's face in that scene. Yeah,
he would have.
Yeah,
he was ready to kill him. The guy just beat him to it. And it's not until like he gets kind of the he reflects on what Uncle Ben said, and he reflects on the sadness of like he wasn't ready to hear those words that would become Uncle Ben's last words to him and stuff like that. I think that really works for this character and does serve as that like bridging the gap to like from being angry Spider-Man to trying to do good Spider-Man, who just also happens to be very, very mopey and sad Spider-Man. But I like that is
that's a good point.
The standout sequence of this movie for me is that
that's a great
like that character turn, and the fact that he wasn't the hero when it would have mattered most for him, which then pays off I think very nicely, and he does kind of get to have the best of both worlds when Green Goblin does kind of do the like, all right, I'm gonna like drop this trolley and Mary Jane, you got to pick one, and he does, he manages to miraculously save both because he's had the growth and the strength of character kind of thing over the course of the movie. So
also New York stands up for him.
And exactly, yeah. They in a post 9/11 world, he gets the assist from the New Yorkers.
Shout out to the Mets cap guy. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah.
You'll have to see it. Wouldn't see that from a guy in a Yankees cap. Put that out there.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Sure, Cameron.
27 titles, Cam.
Eat my shorts,
but
Logan.
But no, I'm glad you brought that up, Trevor, because it also reminded me of basically the scene right before that of Uncle Ben and Peter in the car together, which is like a really intense scene of like Peter just basically being like, fuck off, Uncle Ben, like, I'm gonna do my thing, and like I think that sets up everything that's about to pay off so well, and like honestly, this Peter Uncle Ben relationship I think is so good for how short it actually takes up of the movie. I think you immediately feel their connection, immediately feel that relationship, immediately feel how close they are, immediately feel how kind of upsetting that moment is, certainly for Uncle Ben, but even for Peter when they kind of get in that fight in the car, and then kind of the ramifications of that afterwards. And for someone who's having to compare with, obviously, Martin Sheen is the next Uncle Ben we get, I actually like this portrayal more, I think. It feels sort of more earnest and world-weary, but also, like, genuine. And I think it makes the kind of final payoff of that so well. So when we do have, Peter chase the burglar who trips out the window, I think that's sort of the moment where everything just sort of slams to a head for him. He sort of realizes, everything that's transpired and what's happening, who he's like, it's sort of the moment for him being like, I don't like who I am right now. Right. And sort of, he's lost Uncle Ben, but also this guy's died too. And even though he would have killed him, I think actually seeing him dead now sort of done something that sort of like snapped him awake as well and been like, I don't want to be that person either though. Right. Like I like so much of that whole with great power, great responsibility sequence that they have in the film. And I think it carries so much into Tobey's Peter being, or Tobey's Spider-Man, I should say, really leaning into like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man throughout his three films, I think, in a way that I don't think Andrew Garfield's really given the chance to, based on how conspiracy-laden his movies are.
Yeah.
And then Tom Holland is obviously just more focused on like being in the Avengers.
Tom Holland's like friendly Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood stuff happens before we meet him in Civil War.
Yeah,
right. And so here we actually, this is the movies where like it's the most like, oh, that's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like, and it also helps that like this will be more relevant in the next movie, but like this is a Peter Parker who's fucking broke as shit. Like he's so poor, and like Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker is the most working class poor Peter Parker out of all of them. That's so much of why I love him too, because that's sort of the Peter Parker again that I feel like I grew up with.
Well, it's like,
and it's that portrayal.
Uncle Ben's intro is basically being like, I got laid off after 35 years of working at the plant as the head engineer. So it's like, yeah, it makes sense, but also it's like he's also super old, and it's like him and Aunt May. It's like they must have been in like their mid 40s when Ben's brother died and his wife died to take in Peter, because Peter's like 18 by the time of this movie. So you have 18-year-old. So like he's old, like 35 years. He should have retired.
Yeah.
Like that's a long career. But the fact that it is like like I got retired, like they laid me off, and that entire thing. It's like we'll make it through no matter what, and it's just like that's a whole thing. Also, shout out to like looking through the paper at car ads, like.
Yeah.
Again, an of its time movie. But also, I did want to like touching on that sequence. It also ties back into your point, Cameron, about like the span of time in this movie is like one of those montages we get is kind of like Peter, like as he's developing his powers. We get the line, which I probably caught more this time around than I had previously, of like Uncle Ben being like, it has been a long time coming that he decides he wants to have this chat with Peter because he has seen a change in Peter. He, whether that like he thinks is a puberty kind of change or whatever, like he has seen Peter getting angrier, becoming distant. We know because we saw the montage that he's, trying to figure out his powers and he's doing all this stuff. But like Uncle Ben doesn't know that. Uncle Ben just sees that his nephew has become incredibly distant, and so even that like feeds into the amount of time that's been happening. It isn't like montage was a day, it was. It has been like weeks of kind of building and building and building before Uncle Ben's like, let me drive you to the library, to his demise. So yeah, I think there are definitely beats like that to enjoy. Any final bits before we dive into a report card on this one?
Let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. Let's
go.
Then yeah, time for the report card. We grade from A+ to F. Logan, what do you want to give Sam Raimi's 2002 Spider-Man here?
I really like it. I mean, like I know that I'm the hottest on it, right, and the highest on it for sure. It's such an important movie within the superhero canon, and also just like on a personal level, it's like such an important movie for me, right? Like I watched this in theaters. I have very fond memories of it. It is sort of one of those movies that really draw me more in love with like going to the movies and seeing stuff. I would give it a B+. I mean, I think it just falls short of where we're going to go next week, and just falls short of like the pantheon of like the best of the best superhero movies, of course, but I think it's probably my second favorite superhero origin story after Batman Begins. Maybe, I mean, I guess Black Panther. We're not going to get into the weeds of that, but it's definitely one of my favorite superhero origin stories for sure. And one that I think does the origin for Peter Parker, I think, as well as one could hope. And I think really sort of brought back into the fold, like with great power comes great responsibility in a way that, it has remained for 2+ decades now. Goblin's great. Mary Jane's great. Peter's great. I give it a B+.
All right. How about you, Cameron?
I'm also going to be giving it a B+. I think that it is, for all the good and bad that's in it, I think it's way more good than bad. I think that this movie I think this trilogy gets a bad rap, mostly because of how it ends. But I think that this movie in particular is kind of like this is, shout out to Dr. Strom, this is back to formula. This is straight up like, this is the formulaic superhero. This is how you do the superhero introduction movie. And I think it sets the tone going forward for a very long time. And I think it is like the original blueprint for the MCU one even.
I mean, with No Way Home, this does technically become the first MCU movie in retrospect, as that has like tied in everything.
It's true. So yeah, I think it's a B+.
I mean, as much as I'm like cooler on this movie than you guys, I mean, it's still a B for me. So it's like in our grading, I mean,
it's a good movie.
In our grading, it's just one notch below you guys. Because I enjoy it. They're definitely, there are like C and maybe even D elements of this movie for me, but overall, Norman's great. The Spider-Man story just in general is great. So yeah, there's enough for me to enjoy in this, and it is, an iconic film in many ways. it's a B for me.
One thing I did want to
solid film. Yeah, go ahead, Logan.
Give a shout out to, I can't remember if whoever just mentioned No Way Home. I also think No Way Home, like the best sequel, prequel story kind of things does, I think just makes this movie even better with like the little snippets we get from Peter of like what happened and how he felt after he sort of got his revenge and how it didn't fill the void at all, right? And I think it just further highlights the whole sequence with Uncle Ben and makes it that much stronger, I think, kind of getting the reflection from a Peter 20 years later, right? So I think it just makes this movie even stronger.
Yeah. I think both No Way Home and like the Spider-Verse movies now like are doing a great job of making this movie better in retrospect and in hindsight. So very solid there. We got a couple of little segments here that we kind of threw together that we'll look at over the course of the series. We have our Sinister Six. So of course, Green Goblin here at the top of our villain ranking. Number one, unsurprisingly thus far. And then of course, the Spider-Man film itself ranking. This currently the top of the Spider-Man rankings. I imagine, we'll definitely do this for the next couple here in the Sam Raimi verse, and then at some point down the line, once Amazing Spider-Man 2 is out there, we can fold in the Amazing Spider-Man movies into the mix.
And just have the same rankings. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There are those little bits that we will revisit, and if we come up with any more that we can like add in next week, we will do that as well. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. This was a weird batch because first and foremost, Disney Plus out there recommending American Born Chinese. And then they recommend Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, The Amazing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Homecoming. Again, all of the Spider-Man movies that are currently available there on Disney Plus for you. And then beyond that,
2015 Fantastic Four.
Yeah, the Fantastic Four from 2015, or Fanfirstic. As well as X-Men Dark Phoenix and X-Men Apocalypse. Still never seen X-Men Dark Phoenix. Still never bothered to go and watch it.
X-Men Apocalypse was that was the nail in the coffin for me. I don't want to see any more of those movies.
Yeah, same.
It was Miles Teller, Michael B. Jordan one. I had blacked that movie out of existence, Trevor. That is such a blast. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's the one where the director on Twitter said, nobody will ever know the actual movie that I shot. I got screwed. Wow, and it's like, and everybody's like, whoa, can't believe it. And then people saw the movie and everybody was like, yeah, no, we can see it because there's a distinct cut where all of a sudden like Rooney Mara has like clearly has a wig on. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and it's all the parts that people are like, hey, this sucked.
Yeah.
So,
we'll have to someday do a Fantastic Four sequence and compare the Fantastic Four movies. No. This is very much when we get to the bottom of the barrel of things. Doing the X-Men movies, the Fantastic Four movies on
X-Men movies. I'm fine.
I'm also okay with X-Men.
X-Men,
X-Men we're getting some good. Fantastic Four, even the best of them is still not great.
Yeah,
there's no such thing as a good Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah,
I'm just putting that out there. There's no such thing.
Yeah. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? I think Cameron, you and I were just talking. Like neither of us watched this week's Secret Invasion.
I had some other stuff come up in my life. So.
Sure. Yeah. I think we're both we're all just kind of only Spider-Man at this moment.
True.
But yeah, that is going to do it. Obviously, Cameron and I did and this will be a preliminary plug. Cameron obviously did our Dial of Destiny spoiler cast on That Nerdy Site show this last week. We will inevitably do Dial of Destiny on That D Plus show when it does make its way there, but you can see that if you are a Indiana Jones fan and enjoyed our month of indie stuff. That is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me to discuss Spider-Man 2002. You can follow Logan at LeftyLogie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
Go a shout out to That Nerdy Science Show. I'm going to take Trevor's plug. Trevor and Cameron have been doing lots of good spoiler casts recently. I will be on soon enough to share, I'm sure, my own thoughts on Dial of Destiny and talk about how fantastic it is and it's great and has no problems at all. It's just a great romp, hopefully. So yeah, go check that out. Go check out their conversation on that.
We know you haven't seen it yet. The audience might not know that you haven't seen it yet. Yes.
Have not seen it yet.
I mean,
as of recording this,
spoiler free, both Cameron and I really enjoyed it.
We had a good time.
Yeah. I'm excited to check it out. I mean, again, one of the, I think, joys of, go check out our conversation on Indiana Jones, the various 4 movies before this on Disney Plus. There should be the episodes pretty much right before this. But one of the things that I found a lot of enjoyment out of was actually, not that I haven't seen Crystal Skull plenty, but in the most recent viewing was kind of finding new things that I really enjoyed about that movie, right? And I think, apart from Temple of Doom, even the worst Indiana Jones movie still has, I think, a lot going for it, right? And yeah, I'm excited to check it out. Go check out all those conversations. I think those are some of our best D+ episodes we've done in a while. Those Indiana Jones ones, a lot of fun. So go check out all that over on That Nerdy Site.
There you go. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Kim?
Yeah, I just put out episode 18 of Jafo this week, which means we're coming to the...
That's the penultimate episode, right?
Penultimate episode's next episode. Episode 19.
There are 20 episodes?
There are 20 episodes.
Okay.
So we're coming up towards the end. We're really actually heading towards the end there.
So it was the anti-penultimate episode.
There we go.
Which is one of my favorite words.
Didn't know that was a word that existed. So there you go.
Anti-penultimate is the next to last.
That is fascinating. That's a cool word.
I learned about penultimate from Penultimate Peril, the Lemony Snicket novel, which was the next last in the series.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I learned anti-penultimate for, I think, a spelling thing in like middle school or something like that. And it was like, that's a fun word, and there's so much to it.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, Jedi Fallen Order, episode 18 out now, so 2 episodes to go. Definitely check those out. YouTube.com/thatnerdysite. One last plug. There is one more week of Tears of the Kingdom Let's Plays from me. The final episodes will be coming out this coming week on youtube.com/thatnerdysite.
Check it out.
This last week we did all of the kind of like 5th Sage stuff on that. So yeah, next week around, we will do kind of what I did with Breath of the Kingdom, where one episode is going to be dedicated to like, here's a look back at all of the memories in the game. So we just do like a big bum rush of the story of the game, and then finally going out to destroy Ganondorf. So yeah, youtube.com/thatnerdysite for all that fun stuff. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and thwip thwip.
Thwip.